In this chapter, we're going to talk about theming, which is changing the look and feel of your website. When you first download Drupal, the normal Drupal download from Drupal.org comes with just a few themes. It comes with the Garland theme, which we see here. That's the default theme for Drupal, and here you can see that it's set up in the default column as the default theme. It comes with Manelli, which is a fixed width version of Garland. Garland here expands and contracts with the width of your browser, but Manelli does not. It's a fixed width. It comes with Blue Marine, which used to be the default theme for Drupal in previous versions, and several other themes here, which honestly are not very commonly used. Most people will go to Drupal.org to download a theme for their website. Let's do that, and I'll show you how it works. Here we have the current version of Drupal.org as of the recording of this video. And we have a link right here to go to the themes page. Even if Drupal.org looks different at the time that you're viewing this video than it does here, you can still go to Drupal.org/project/themes. That's themes with a capital T. And what you'll see is the theme repository for Drupal. And there are lots and lots of themes for Drupal. You can see, well, there's several on the front page here, but you can see that there are pages and pages of themes for Drupal. I'm on the 6th page here, and I haven't gotten out of the A's. They just seem to go on and on and on. And they're of varying quality. There are some themes and theme systems that are particularly notable or popular. The Zen theme, which at Drupal.org/project/Zen is a whole system for building themes and sub-themes. We recommend it often and touch upon it a little bit in our theming videos. But if you're building your own theme from scratch, Zen is a good starting place with lots of documentation and that kind of thing. But there are lots of pre-existing themes, and you can kind of run through here. There's, if you do searches on the web, there are a few websites that list sort of reviews of themes and list top 10 lists of the best themes that they think are in Drupal. But we're going to actually use the theme that we built in our theming videos, which is called 960 Robots. It's called that because it's based on the 960 grid system, and we'll show you how to download it here and install it for the site. Here's the 960 Robots theme. If you want to just go right to it yourself, you can go to Drupal.org/project/960, spelled out NINESIXTY robots. And that's the project page for the 960 Robots theme. And what we can see is that there's two different release versions here. There's the 1.0 version for Drupal 6 and the 2.0 version for Drupal 6. We'll download the latest one just by clicking the download link, and we'll save the file to our desktop. Once we've downloaded the file, we're going to need to go to our operating system and decompress it. This may be different on your operating system, how it works. And in OS X here, I just double click on it and it will gzip it, that's the .gz extension, and untar it, which is the .tar extension. And now we've got the theme right here on our desktop. Now we can go to our FTP program and upload these files to our server. We're using FileZilla, which is a cross-platform FTP and SFTP program. All I need to do to upload it to our server is to click on it and basically drag it over. So let's see. Here's the root directory, well, the web root directory of our server. And what we can see is that Drupal has several subdirectories here. Many people may think that uploading into the themes directory is the right thing to do. If you look in this themes directory, this is where Blue Marine and Garland live. And that would actually work. If you did upload to the themes directory, it would technically work, but it's really not the best practice. It's not the right place to upload things. You want to upload into sites, all, and themes. And if this themes directory is not here, you need to create it on your web server. We've already created this directory. The reason for putting your theme files and module files in the sites all directory is you want to keep all of your customizations in one place. Oftentimes when you upgrade Drupal, you'll overwrite the directories and files at the root level of your Drupal installation. And by keeping everything in the sites directory, you can know that that defines your version of the site. And so we're going to put our stuff right there. And we take the 960 robots theme and just drag it over. And now we have the 960 robots directory. We've uploaded the whole directory here. You can see there's the CSS directory and images and JavaScript inside there. And when we go back over to our website and refresh this themes listing page, we now have the 960 robots theme listed at the top here. I'm going to change it so that this is the default theme for our website. So 960 robots will be the theme for our website. I'm going to disable Garland as an enabled theme, and you'll notice that when I hit the save configuration button here, that not only do we get a new theme for the website, but now 960 robots is enabled. Basically, whatever is your default theme is also enabled. If I had multiple themes enabled here, we could use theme switching, where users to the website could conceivably switch their themes. It might be there might be a specific use case that you would have for that, but it's honestly not used that commonly. So now when I go to the home page of the website, I've got the so now we have the 960 robots theme showing up throughout the website. However, it's really more meant as a front-end theme with this big header here and the way that it handles blocks and stuff like that. It's really not meant to be as general purpose as a theme like Garland. So I'm going to switch the administration theme under Administer, Site Configuration, Administration Theme. I'm going to switch it so that the administration theme is Garland. There are actually several administration-specific themes that are out there in the Drupal repository that are actually meant to be specifically an administration theme, as opposed to Garland, which is meant to be a more generalized theme. We're also using Garland because it comes with Core, and you'll be sure to have it installed already yourself. So now when I do that, I will get Garland throughout everything in the admin section. I can also optionally check this box here to use the administration theme for editing content on the website. So if I go to a piece of content and click on it here, I'll show you how that works. For instance, if I go to the home page and click the edit link here, I get the Garland theme here. You may or may not want to use that option. I'll leave it on for now, just for the sake of clarity. Another thing about themes is that they oftentimes will have a variety of settings of their own. So the 960 Robots theme is using Twitter for the site slogans here. That was a really good example for our theming videos, kind of a fun thing to do. However, I think for our site, we want to actually control everything on the page and not have random tweets coming in and showing up on our page. I think the first thing I need to do here is go and add a site slogan, because I don't know that we actually have one for our site yet. So if I go under site information here, there's the place where I can enter in a slogan. And so I'm just going to type in a slogan and hit submit here, hit save configuration. And now when I go to the home page, we're still not going to see that. We're still seeing Twitter. So I go under Administer, Themes, and I have a configure link for any theme that I have enabled on the website will have the configure link. And Garland's also showing the configure link because it's the administration theme here. So I want to configure this theme. And we get a lot more into the specifics of this page in our Administering Drupal video. So I'm just going to kind of whip through it here. But I need to enable the site slogan here so that it'll show up. It's already showing up because of the way that theme is set up and configured with Twitter, but I need to actually enable it so that the default site slogan will show up. And then down the bottom here, I have some theme-specific settings where I can uncheck the option to use Twitter for the site slogan. If I save the configuration here, we're still not seeing the site slogan in Garland. We could do that actually if we wanted. I don't want to, but I could go into configure here and enable the site slogan for Garland. But now when we go to the home page, we can see that the site slogan is showing up here underneath our site name. So you can see that by downloading and enabling a new theme for our website, we've really completely changed the look and feel of the website. We have the primary navigation showing here, and the active item gets highlighted like this. We have a very specifically formatted search box with a little magnifying glass here. Our header's showing up with these robot images, and we have different fonts for the page, different line spacing, all sorts of, different CSS files. There's even some JavaScript that when I click in this search box, it removes this search text here. So you can see how by downloading and installing a theme for our website, we've been able to completely change the look and feel of the website. There are lots of different themes out there that you can download for free from Drupal.org. There are also some commercial themes out there that tend to be a little bit better quality. They're thought out a little bit more, and there's a sort of a commercial model for making sure that they're kind of bulletproof themes. You could also build themes yourself either from scratch, maybe using our theming videos as a guide, or perhaps using a system like the Zen theme, which is very well documented and a great way to build a theme for yourself. Another way to customize the look of your site is to add blocks onto the page. These blocks are added into regions, which commonly show up in places like the sidebar, but there are also, in many themes, other regions. We'll take a look at how those work. Drupal comes by default with this navigation block enabled here, and if I log out, I'll see the login block, which shows on the pages as well. I'll show you where those are created and how you can customize those. If I go under Administer, Site Building, Blocks, the first item here, I can see the blocks listing page. Now in the last chapter, we changed the administration theme to Garland. However, I'm in the administration section, but what I'm actually seeing is the 960 robots theme that I'm using on the front end of the site. The reason for this is that the blocks page is attempting to show me where the different regions are that I can add blocks to. And what I'm seeing is that there's this right sidebar region on the right here, but there's another region here, which is called the left sidebar region on the right. And if I scroll down to the bottom, there's this footer left region and footer right region and footer bottom region. And I can add my blocks to those regions. I can also see how this works for Garland. We have these sort of sub-tab links here. So I'm seeing the 960 robots. But if I go over to Garland, you can see how this differs for Garland. In Garland, there's a header region up here at the top of the page, a right sidebar region. I scroll down here, there's a left sidebar region. There's a region at the bottom of the content, and then a footer region down the bottom of the page. Let's go back over to the 960 robots theme, and we'll enable a couple of blocks, and I'll show you how that works. So the first block that I want to enable is the newsletter block. You can either drag and drop using this little handle here, or there's this drop-down menu where I can enable and put it up into, let's say I want to put it into our right sidebar, which we have this little reminder is showing on the right side of the page. So both the left and right sidebar will show up here. It doesn't actually preview the block in the region, but it moves it up in our listing so that now I've got the Lullabot newsletter showing up in our right sidebar here. And I'm reminded down the bottom here that I need to actually click Save in order to show this. I'll click Save and show you how that works. And now we can see that there's this Lullabot newsletter region on the right side here. In most themes in Drupal, if there's nothing in a region, that region will collapse and the rest of the page will expand to accommodate it. So if there was nothing in this right sidebar region, it would collapse. And as we saw on the home page before, when there was just one column, the content was wider. Now when we go to the home page, you can see that the content is actually more narrow. This comes in particularly handy if you have blocks that are just showing on some pages of your website but not showing on other pages. I'm going to create a custom block that will just show on the front page so you can see how that would work. So in addition to the blocks that you have listed here, we can also add a block and add a custom block. And so what I can do here is click Add Block. And let's say I wanted to have some sort of a new news block. We'll call it just that. New news. And this is how the block description is how it will show up on the block listing page. And then I can create a title that will show at the top of the block. The title is usually optional. Let's call it new news, and I'll paste in a little bit of lorem ipsum text. Actually, that's a lot of lorem ipsum text, so let's keep it a little bit more reasonable. We have an input format selector that's very similar to the node pages. If I had complex HTML in here, I might want to select full HTML, but I can just keep the filtered HTML here because I don't have any special HTML in there. We have options for custom visibility settings. Drupal has this option where users can choose which blocks they want to see on their own pages. Again, a feature that Drupal has built in that most websites don't enable. I'm just going to leave this, well, there's not actually a default setting. I want users to not be able to control whether or not they can see this block. I want to decide that for them. We could also have a block that shows up just for specific roles. So if you wanted to have a block that just showed up for logged in users on the website or administrators, that would be a good thing to do. And then we have this option here where we can choose which pages on the website we want this block to show up on. The normal setting, if I were to just submit this page without selecting one of these, is the top one, to show the block on every page except those here, and there are none here, so it would show on every single page of the website. I can also choose to show it only on certain listing pages, or I can type in a bunch of PHP and if the code returns true, then show it on those pages. That's obviously a pretty advanced option. I want to have it only show on the front page of our website. So down below here you have the description of what you can type into this field. First it says that you can use the asterisk as a wildcard in this field, which would be good. Let's say you had, this is a good trick, you have HTML quick tips, reminders for you've got some site editors or site contributors who might not be that familiar with HTML. You could create a block and have it just show up on node/add/asterisk and node/asterisk/edit. And this would just show up on the node add and edit pages, and it might remind people how to create bold text and how to create italic text and how to create hypertext links and things like that. I'm not going to use that option though. I want to actually have it just show up on the front page of the website, and we have this special text that you can type in here. If I type less than, front, greater than, then this block will only show on the front page of our website. So I want to show only on the front page. And if I click Save Block, I now have it this block set to only show on the front page of our website. However, I haven't actually assigned it to one of our regions yet, so Drupal doesn't actually know where to display this block. So I want to show this in so I have the new news block listing here, and I want to show this in our right sidebar. However, I want it to show up underneath the newsletter block. And so we have the new news showing up under the newsletter block. We also have the switch user block, which the devel module has created for us. We enabled that in a previous chapter. However, we want to just be sure that that's not going to be enabled on our live site. So I'm going to turn that off now. I just switch that to none and scroll down the bottom here and hit Save Blocks. And now we have the Lullabot newsletter block showing up on the right sidebar just like it was before. However, our new custom block's not showing up. That's the way we wanted it to be. And we don't want it to show up unless we go to the home page of the website, where it'll show up showing us our new news. And if we go to other pages on the front end of our website, our news page, there's nothing there. And press releases, there's nothing there. These custom blocks are really good for just adding something quickly to your page that you want people to know about on your website. And blocks in general are good for displaying things that you want to show up throughout your website. They're oftentimes aggregations of things like new comments on your site, new users to your website. Lots of new modules will oftentimes add blocks. You can create blocks through the Views module, and you can sort of sprinkle them throughout your website as you see fit, and they can act as navigation or maybe just promotional things like this new news block.
One of Drupal's greatest strengths is that you can find thousands of modules that can do everything from event calendars to photo galleries to talk like a pirate day filters, or anything that you can think of just about. The downside to having thousands of modules to choose from is you have to find the one that you need in amongst all of that variety. So this section will talk a little bit about how to use the tools on Drupal.org and elsewhere to find the modules that meet your specific needs. In a previous section, we had discussed, some of the modules that we use for just about every project. If I go to Administer, Site Building, and Modules, what I'll see is a list of just, some of the general best practice modules. Some of the modules we see here we use on pretty much every single site, like CCK is a good one that lets us set up all of our fields the way we need them. Then there's the Views module, again, another critical module for just about every Drupal site to build our listing pages. And then under Other, you have a lot of these sort of common modules, especially Path Auto is one you use just about all the time. But occasionally something will come up that you haven't previously planned for, and a client has a need and you need to go out into the module repository and figure out something new to use. If we go under Create Content Page, you can see that currently, in order to fill out additional formatting here, we have to teach our content editors how to type HTML. So in other words, if they wanted something bold, they'd have to type strong tags and say bold. And this works fine if your content editors are web savvy, and in their site before they had Drupal they were doing this anyway. But a lot of times people are more used to typing things in something like Microsoft Word, or Dreamweaver. So for that kind of a situation, what you really want is you want not to have content editors typing in HTML by hand, but you actually want what's called a what you see is what you get, or WYSIWYG editor. The place where your journey begins to find any Drupal module is on Drupal.org, typically. This is the central repository where all modules are located. Just as before, I'll go to the Download section and the Modules section, and I get a gigantic list of all of the modules that Drupal offers. Something that's useful to do right out of the gate is to click this Filter by Compatibility to only show modules that are compatible with your version of Drupal. There's no point in downloading 5.x modules because they will not work with Drupal 6, and vice versa. Along the side, you can also filter by different types of projects. For example, if we were looking for other developer-type projects, such as Devel module, we could click this, and the list would be filtered to only show development-related projects. In our case, however, we want to search all modules, so I'll remove the developer filter. And we want to search them for WYSIWYG. On the search results page, we can see we got quite a few search results actually for what you see is what you get. We have things like WYSIWYG filter, we have FCK editor, TinyMCE, other specific types of WYSIWYG editors. So what we want to do really is try and figure out which of these myriad of choices should we actually use. Let's look at the first one here, TinyMCE. We've got a big warning here that says this module has been replaced by WYSIWYG API, which also integrates TinyMCE. So that's a nice hint that we probably shouldn't use this module and instead look at WYSIWYG API. So let's look at that one. Here we've arrived at a Drupal project page. And we already talked about how to download modules down here in this little release table. But let's take a look at the other information that we can find out from this page. The first thing that's interesting to note is you have a list of maintainers for this module. So there's 2 people maintaining this module, Sun and 2D. And if I click this link, I'll be taking the list to all of the people who have ever saved anything to this module. The number of commits is an indication of their activity level. Commits is basically a funny word that basically means how many times have they changed the module code. So seeing a lot of these is good. That means that this person's very experienced with this module and they've spent quite a bit of time maintaining it. You can see that Sun has been on this project up to a year ago, and his last commit was 1 week ago. That's a good indication that he's being active and caring for the project, and these are all good things. If we click on the name of either of the maintainers, we'll be taken to a user page for them where we can find out more about them and how they've contributed to the project. You can see that Sun is the author of several modules and co-maintainer of several. This is a really good sign. This indicates that he probably generally knows what's going on in the community. You can see that not only does he contribute modules, but translations, documentation, helps out in support forums, and provides Drupal-related services. This is also a good sign. It means that he has a vested interest in Drupal and having it be, really awesome. If I scroll all the way to the bottom of this page, I can find out information like how long he's been in the Drupal community. as well as what projects that he's committed to and how many times. All useful information to know. Incidentally, sometimes when you see a list this extensive, it might mean that someone is way overtaxed and not actually caring for their modules very well. So you do want to kind of do some research and find out, how it's going. If I click the Track tab, this will take me to all of the discussions on Drupal.org that they've been a part of. By scrolling down this list, I can see that, wow, they've been on the community for a long time. If I click the last link, I see that they have 235 pages worth of discussions they've been a part of at Drupal.org. Again, this is really good sign for the health of any modules that they are involved with, because they are generally very tuned in to what's going on in Drupal, and this is all a good thing. If I click the Track Code button, I can even see every single change they've made to every single module. And if you know PHP code at all, this can be useful to just click on something and kind of evaluate how well this person generally knows their code and whether or not it's safe to use their modules. Something that's interesting to note about contributed modules versus Drupal core is Drupal core has a community of people. There's maybe 800 or 1,000 different people who all work on Drupal core, and they do peer review of all code, security reviews of all code. But in Contrib, each maintainer of each module is sort of the king of their own castle, or queen. And so they have the ability to basically commit whatever they want once they get past the initial gate of getting a CVS account. And so you should sometimes be a little bit cautious of what you just take from Contrib and put on your site willy-nilly. It's always good to make sure that the modules that you're using are well supported. Another really useful tool on the project page is this issues block over here. What this will show you is a summary of all of the bug reports, feature requests, support requests, and other types of tasks that people have logged against the module. Now, a lot of people might look at a number like this and say, wow, 70 open issues. Well, this must be a really buggy module. And that could be true, but there's a couple of things to bear in mind here. One is these are split between all issues and bug reports, and you can see that the ratio of bug reports is much better. Only 19 open issues as opposed to 70. And the other thing that's important to note here is that a high number of issues generally indicates that it's a module that has popularity and people are using it. If we, by contrast, go to the Drupal project, you'll see that the Drupal project has, 3,000 bug reports, which is much higher than WYSIWYG module has, but it's also the most stable code that we have in the entire website. What this means is it's an indication that people care about this project, so they're logging additional bug reports, features and such as they're testing it out and sort of recommending changes. One other ratio worth looking at here is the number of open issues versus the number of total issues. The total encompasses all issues that were fixed and closed, all issues that were marked won't fix, so they were invalid issues, and so on and so forth. So really this open issues number is the more important one, but the ratio between these two can be very helpful when evaluating a module's health. Let's go ahead and click into the issue queue. All projects on Drupal.org have one of these issue queues. What it is essentially a ticketing system where people can log things such as support requests, bug reports, and feature requests. Anytime you see a lot of green here, that's a good sign. That means that the maintainer is actively fixing issues and it's a well cared for module and there's a good community support behind it. When you see a lot of active issues and not a lot of fixed issues, those are things to be a little bit concerned about. Because that means that people are filing bugs and nobody's listening. Another thing that's interesting to look for are issues that are either needs work or needs review. That means that there are other developers that are involved in this project and they're submitting code for review by the maintainer. What all of these factors taken together means is that this module is big enough that it's attracted its own sort of community around it. It means that people care about it. They're filing bug reports, they're filing support requests, they're fixing each other's support requests. These are all really good signs because if anything ever happened to the maintainer or they just got busy with life and had to leave, there's a lot of people who could pick up the slack here and continue to maintain the module throughout the ages. In contrast to this, let's look at a module that's not doing quite so well. This is a module called FlexiNode. FlexiNode was the precursor to CCK. FlexiNote has a couple of interesting things that you can see right out of the gate. The first one is that the last commit that happened to the project was 2 years ago. That's a bad sign. You also don't see any 6.x releases. You don't even see 5.x releases. This is 4.7, which is pretty much ancient history in the Drupal span of things. You can see the last date that one was released was in February of 2007. If we go to their issue queues, we see the ratio between open and total issues is more like 50%, which means that over half of their issues are still open and unresolved. And as we're scrolling down here, we're seeing an awful lot of active and no green, and those are all bad, bad signs. So using these tools and techniques, this will allow you to sort of identify some of the rockstar contributors in the Drupal community whose modules you can generally trust. Another way to kind of find good modules is to see what the community is thinking in terms of a trust level. One really great tool for finding out, sort of the community trust level of modules is the project usage overview, which is at drupal.org/project/usage. We looked at this screen a little bit earlier, which is, a gigantic list of all the Drupal projects that are in use in the wild. So this list is ordered by the sites that are actively running the projects, which is a really good indication of popularity. Unlike download statistics where someone could download it and then delete it right away after trying it out, these are showing you the ones in active use, which is a really good indication of popularity. If we look through this list, we see that our WYSIWYG project we were looking at falls into probably the top, say 25 modules. That's a really good sign. There's also this one though, FCK Editor. So let's click into that and see what that one's about. What we have here is a usage statistics graph for this one module as opposed to all of Drupal that shows over time how the module's popularity has grown. I can also click here to go to the FCK Editor's modules page. What I can see here is this module also has many maintainers, some who have committed as recently as 2 days ago or 9 weeks ago. When you hit a situation like this, the best thing might honestly be just to download both modules and try them out and see which one works for you. One nice thing though that WYSIWYG has going for it, one nice thing about this project as opposed to FCK Editor is this project is more of an API. You can tell from the screenshot here that it will let you use multiple different types of WYSIWYG editors as opposed to being hard-coded to only work with one. So that can be a nice bit of flexibility to give your site. Additionally, in Drupal, anything that acts sort of like an API-ish module generally gets a lot of support in terms of community prowess behind it, because Drupal just loves its APIs. One final thing to point out in WYSIWYG's favor is if I scroll down to the bottom, I read this little interesting sentence, which is that this module developer has pledged that this module will have a full release for Drupal 7 on the day that Drupal 7 is released. That's really important. What that means is that this module developer is keeping up with the bleeding edge of Drupal development. And so in the future, when you need to update your Drupal site to 7 or 8 or 9, this is a pretty good project to hedge your bets on. The maintainer is well aware of developments going on in the Drupal world, and they've committed to actually following through with it. So we've kind of explored how to find the modules on Drupal.org, which is the central repository where everything sort of lives. There are other ways to find modules as well, though. This is a site called DrupalModules.com, and it pulls in information from Drupal.org so we can do similar searches and find the modules here. In addition to, sort of the name and description of projects, they also have a rating on features, reliability, ease of use, and documentation. And if I click into any of these projects, I can also read user reviews from people who have used the modules and sort of have opinions on how well they work. So that can be useful information as well to validate your module choices. Another great way to learn about modules is through word of mouth. This is groups.drupal.org, which is a website that contains both regional user groups, such as the Los Angeles group here, as well as sort of special interest groups, working groups in the Drupal community, such as documentation team or location and mapping and so on. If I go to the Groups tab, I can be taken to a list of all of the groups on the site. I can also filter it by a specific locality if I want, so Portland. You'll want to mind things such as case sensitivity here. Sometimes this search box can be a little bit funny that way. So if I click on the group name, I'm taken to the page for the group. and I can see a bunch of posts in here. Some of these group pages will look a little bit different, and some of them have kind of tweaked them out with special blocks and things like that. But in general, the types of information that you can find here are things like the categories of tags that they have, any jobs that are posted directly in that area. So a good place to go if you want to find, paying Drupal work. Group events, so oftentimes there are, sort of social events, meetups, mixers, Drupal camps, and things like that. And also a little supplementary information. This is a good way to get to know other Drupal people in your area, and something Drupal people love to do is just exchange information about what modules they're using that are cool. So it can be a great way to learn about new modules that you didn't otherwise know about. Another great resource to keep in your back pocket is Drupal Planet, which is at drupal.org/planet. This is basically a list of blog entries from people who are Drupal developers or Drupal business owners about things that they're working on, sites that they've done, events coming up, just a good general resource to keep on top of, just to keep abreast of what's going on with the larger Drupal development direction. One other place that's really cool is the case studies section of Drupal.org at drupal.org/cases. In here, you'll find people who have really taken the time to write up detailed case studies about big sites that they've made. This is one for Popular Science magazine. And you can see that we have screenshots of the websites, have little diagrams that showed how they did certain site features, sort of the article structure, how they put the site together. Really, really interesting stuff to try and sort of get in the developers' heads who built these projects to find out what modules they used, how they did it, what special tricks they had to learn. This particular one has an entire list of all of the modules that they used on the site, which just goes on and on and on and on and on. But a great way to find out about additional modules you might otherwise have heard of to build actual real-world sites. So this is a really useful resource to see as well. And finally, there are Drupal forums, such as the post-installation forum, where you can sort of ask questions like, how would I build a hierarchical site? Where do I start? And people will give you recommendations on other modules that you can use. If you're more of the IRC type, there's also #Drupal-support on irc.freenode.net. It's important to make sure that you're asking questions in that channel and not in #Drupal, because #Drupal is for developers asking coding-related questions. One final sort of, parting word is a secret ninja trick, which is if you go to drupal.org/taxonomy/term/14, this is actually a taxonomy listing of all of the modules as they're being created on drupal.org. So some of these are such early releases that they don't even have downloads available yet, but you can get an idea of what new stuff is coming down the pipe. You can get an RSS feed here. And there's also a Twitter feed at Drupal_modules that pipes in this RSS feed, so if you wanted to subscribe to that via Twitter, you can do that as well. So in this section, we talked all about how to find and evaluate modules. Modules are probably the most important concept of Drupal. Every single feature on your site pretty much is created by one or more of these contributed modules. So you'll spend a lot of your time as a Drupal site builder sort of talking to people, finding modules, playing with them, seeing if they'll work for you, but keeping up to date on that knowledge is really important because it makes you more valuable as a Drupal site builder.
So now that we've determined that the WYSIWYG API module is the best option for our site, we're going to take a look at how we've set that up, and we're also going to talk a little bit about input formats and filters and what that means and why it's really important to understand, particularly in the instance of something like using a WYSIWYG. So we already have the WYSIWYG module installed, enabled, and we've done most of the configuration for it. So let's go take a look and see what we have so far. So I'm going to go to Administer. And then because I'm dealing with module configuration, the simplest way for me to get to where I need to be is to use the By Module screen under Administer. Since we're dealing with the WYSIWYG module, which begins with W, it's going to be all the way at the bottom of this screen. So I'm just going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. And you can see we have WYSIWYG. It only has one item listed under it, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that link. So this brings me to the WYSIWYG module configuration. So on this screen you can see that we have input formats listed, And we've seen them briefly, input formats, on when we were creating content underneath the body text area. There's a collapsed field set that says input formats, and this is something that is global across all of the content types on your site. And basically what an input format is doing is it's a way to filter the text that your users are typing in, and you can use that filtering to either strip out things that you don't want for security reasons, or just because you want to clean it up and you want to control how the text is being output. But you can also use it to modify and add new features so that when someone puts in certain kinds of text, they don't have to do a lot of work to get it to look the way that you want it to. We're going to talk a lot more about input formats in a few minutes here. So we're just going to continue to talk about our WYSIWYG configuration for right now. So we have input formats. We have two input formats on our site. Both of them are set to use the FCK editor. That's the plugin that we've decided to use on this site with the WYSIWYG module. And to see what's available for WYSIWYG module, if I look down here at installation instructions, there's a whole list of all of the different kinds of WYSIWYG plugins that we could use. And down here at the bottom, you can see that FCK editor's checked off. This is the one that we have installed. This is a really, really helpful section because this basically tells you how to get that plugin and make sure that it's going to work properly with WYSIWYG. It's a little bit different than a typical module installation in Drupal. And so what you need to do is go download the actual plugin. So I went to the FCK editor website and downloaded that here, and you have that link handy right here. And then there are instructions on where to place that once you get it. So typically you'll download that as a compressed file, and you'll need to uncompress it and then put the contents of that into a new directory you're going to have to create under Sites All. You'll have to create a new directory called Libraries, and then you would put whichever WYSIWYG it is in there. Let's take a look real quick in my FTP client, and we can see the directory structure for this. So here is my FTP client, and over here on the right hand side is the server that I'm working on right now. So this is my Drupal root, and going into Sites, All. Now remember, we're putting all of our modules in the modules directory, and then next to that I've created the libraries directory, and then within the libraries directory I downloaded the FCK editor compressed file, uncompressed it, and now I have this FCK editor folder. And that's what I need to have set up in order for WYSIWYG module to be able to find FCK editor and use it. So let's come back here to configuration screen for WYSIWYG. So once you get it installed properly, go back up here to the top. For each of my input formats, I select which editor I want, so I only have FCK editor, and then you can edit the actual editor settings. So instead of WYSIWYG module settings, this is now the FCK editor settings. You have a bunch of collapsed field sets, and honestly, most of the settings that are in here by default are pretty much going to be good for you out of the box. But you can go through them and tweak them to your heart's content. So I'm just going to briefly go through here really quickly and just show you the few things I did change. Under basic setup, it's enabled by default, and we're allowing people to turn it off if they want to, if they really don't want that. It's a nice option because not everybody likes to use WYSIWYGs. Buttons and plugins is sort of an important one. This is where you actually select which buttons are going to show in the WYSIWYG toolbar when someone's trying to edit or create content. So I've selected a few items here that are most used. For FCK Editor, if you don't select any buttons in this configuration when you first set it up, you're going to get every single button. So you'll have a toolbar that's huge. It's going to be like 3 layers deep and have every single button. Very overwhelming and confusing. So I definitely recommend that you go in and select the ones that you feel like your users are going to need to use so you don't overwhelm them with a huge toolbar. One other thing that we have on this list, is just down here all the way at the bottom, sort of in the corner, is this teaser break. And this is so that someone can, just set a location within their text, their block of text, and say that that's where they would like to have the teaser split happen. So that's a really handy one to make sure you have enabled as well, and it's easy to miss because it's all the way at the bottom there. So those are my buttons, and honestly the rest of these, I've left all the rest of these at their defaults. but you can pick the location of the toolbar. Do you want it at the top or the bottom of the text area field itself? Clean up and output. This is simply a little bit of work that's done in terms of being able to clean up the HTML that's actually created by the editor. And then if you want any special CSS, there are some CSS settings that you can add in here if you want to get fancy with things. So that's pretty much all I have set up in here, and it works great just the way that it is with just those few changes. So now let's go look at our Create Content form and see how this has changed our form. So I'm going to go over to Create Content, and we'll look at News Article. And when I come in for the news article now, you notice that we don't have a teaser splitter button anymore, and we have this handy little toolbar that will give us WYSIWYG. So let's add some text in here and see how this works. So I have some lorem ipsum already copied. I'll paste that in. And now you'll see, so I can, highlight things and bold them. I can do a strike through here. So you can see it works just like any other WYSIWYG. And again, remember we put that teaser splitter in there. So if I wanted to put my teaser splitter right there, I could do that. And then it adds my break tag. So now this would be my teaser above the line, and then everything else would be on the full text only. We can also disable the rich text if we want. We can toggle this back and forth, and this will show us the plain HTML that's actually happening in the background. So we have our strong tag and our strike tag here, along with our paragraph breaks. So I can turn the rich text back on, and everything still looks the same. And I actually need to put in a title and a category before I can save this. So, and we'll put this in our services category. And now we'll just scroll down to the bottom and save this. And we can see we have our content's been created. And you'll notice that the bold is showing up, but our strike through is not. And everything's kind of mushed together. We don't actually have our separate paragraphs like we wanted to. So there's something funny going on. And 9 times out of 10 when you're setting up WYSIWYG, something like this is going to happen. This is extremely common, and this is sort of the biggest pain with getting WYSIWYG set up on your site. It all looks good until you actually create content with it. So the reason that this is happening is because we don't have our input formats configured correctly to use all of the HTML that we're using. And so right now, the filtered HTML format is stripping out our HTML tags to make things look the way that we want them to look. So let's go take a look at the input formats and what we need to do to get them to work with our new WYSIWYG editor. So I'm going to go to Administer, and down under Site Configuration we have the input formats, whole section just for them. When we get to this page, you can see that we have the 2 input formats that we've seen before listed here, filtered HTML and full HTML. And you can see that filtered is our default, which means that all users can use that on the site. Now if you look under roles, it's telling us that filtered, all roles may use that. But for full HTML, it's saying no roles may use this. So right now, no one on the site can use it except for the super user, or user 1, who is the original user we created. Everybody else is limited to filtered HTML right now, and honestly that's fine. The reason I don't want to give other roles access to full HTML is because there are a lot of security implications with that. When you have full HTML, that means that any user would be able to use any tag, HTML tag, including things like embed and script. And if you allow those to be entered into the site, people can inject all kinds of nasty things, redirect people away from the site, sniff information, prompt users to give up their password and send it off to another site, and those kinds of things. So we want to be very, very careful about giving full HTML to people because it really can lead to very dangerous vulnerabilities in your site. So let's look at the filtered HTML, which is actually filtering things out and stripping things out and controlling what our users can actually do. And let's see what we're telling them they can and cannot do. So I'm going to actually go and configure the filtered HTML. And you'll see we have the name. Again, all of the roles are checked, and this is grayed out because this is the default format, so everybody has access to it, and we're not allowed to change that unless we didn't make it the default anymore. Now down here at the bottom, you'll see this thing called a list of filters. Now, an input format is just simply a grouping of different filters. So you can have many different filters running at the same time, and they're just grouped together into an input format. So we actually have 4 filters that run every time someone puts content into the body area. All of these filters are modifying the text. So we have the HTML corrector filter, which is simply trying to help clean up our HTML. In the greater web world, there's something called HTML tidy, does something very similar. Just trying to clean things up if there are messed up tags and things like that in the HTML. The HTML filter, this is the culprit that we'll be dealing with in a minute. This is creating a restricted list of HTML tags that our users are allowed to actually use on the site. And so we'll be looking at this in a little more detail in a second here. The line break converter is going to convert whenever you hit the enter key and you want to create like a break or a paragraph in your text, you can just create that in a plain text field, and the line break converter will turn that into break and paragraph tags. Since we're using a WYSIWYG, that's not happening for us, and that's another issue we need to deal with. And then the last one we have here is the URL filter, and all that does is if in plain text someone types in something that's URL, begins with HTTP, it'll just turn it into an actual clickable link, so you don't actually have to write in the anchor tag and then put the link inside the link and that kind of thing in the text. It'll just automatically convert it into a link for you. So that's just a nice convenience. So, like I said, we're having some issues here. We have some HTML tags that are simply not showing up in our new content. So let's go back up here to the top, and we're going to click on Configure and see what our configuration is and how we can modify that. Each filter gets its own section here, so if it actually has configuration options, you can see we only have 2 sections. We have URL filter and HTML filter. The other filters don't have configuration, so they aren't listed here. The HTML filter is the one that we need to deal with. So we're telling it to strip any tags that aren't allowed, and then in this text box here we are giving a list of allowed HTML tags. So if an HTML tag is not in this field here, it's going to get stripped out no matter what. So this is where we can fix our little problem. So the tags that we want to add are strike. That was our HTML tag for the strike through that wasn't appearing. And then we also weren't having our break and paragraph tags appear. So I'm going to go ahead and just put those tags in. Okay, so now that I have that done, let me go ahead and save this. So I've added my new tags. So let's go back to that content and see if that helped anything. So I'm going to go back to news, because this was a news article. And you see the first one here is text is fun. We have our bold, we have our strike through, and we have the teaser splitter has cut the teaser off. And if I click through to the full node, you can see we now have our paragraph. So we've managed to fix it so that the WYSIWYG is actually working, and the HTML filter is letting the WYSIWYG do its job. This is one thing also to keep in mind when you add those buttons to the toolbar. If you give someone a button that adds HTML, but your input format doesn't actually allow it, then you're going to frustrate your users a lot. So when you add those buttons, you should note down what that HTML is and go make sure that your input format is set properly to allow for that. One thing we haven't looked at yet is adding images. It's all good and well when we have text, but people are probably going to want to put some images in there too. So we have a few things set up, and let's go see how we've handled that. So I'm going to go back to Administer. And what I've done here is I've actually added an image field to the content type so that people can upload images and then insert them. So I'm going to go look at my content types. And the news article content type is where I've done this. And I'm not editing the content type itself, I'm going to be managing the fields within it. When we get here, you can see that I have something called post image, and it has field post image as the machine name. It is a file type, so we're using the file field module, which is adds a file field for CCK. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on configure so we can see how I've actually set this up. Now you'll notice when we're looking at the basic information on this field that the widget type is actually set to image, not to file. I'm using the image field module in conjunction with the file field module to supply us this widget. It does a little bit of image handling for us to make things a little easier. Now if I scroll down here a bit, we can see what the image field is providing for us. Under permitted upload file extensions, it's already filled in common image formats for us, so PNG, GIF, and JPEG, and that's pretty much all we need. And so I've left all of these are default settings here. The few settings that I have actually changed, one of the things I did is I set a path where these images are going to be stored. If I don't put a path here, they're going to be put just into the general files directory, and since I'd like to sort of know which ones are images that are attached to posts versus just every file we may or may not upload to the site, I went ahead and created a separate path for that. So that's where I have, I have under the files directory, Drupal's created a new directory called post_images, and that's where all of these files will go. You can also set various restrictions if you want. I haven't done that here, but if you want to control what the size is that people can upload, if you don't want them hogging up tons of bandwidth uploading huge things. You can also set alternative text and title text settings. Images should typically have those. Again, I don't have these actually configured because we're going to be inserting these into regular text. We're not using them as images per se as the content itself. A default image, again, I'm using this just to upload images into text. This isn't like an image gallery or something, so this isn't an important thing for me. This setting here is important, and this HTML insert setting is being added by the file field insert module. So this is another module that we're using. And basically, file field insert just works with file field, so that when you upload something on the node creation form, you'll get a little button that says insert this into the text area, and it just makes it really easy so that you don't have to figure out what the path is and then try and get the URL and then insert the image manually by writing HTML. It just puts it in there for you. So I've enabled that for here so that I can make it much easier for my users. The other thing you can do is you can determine when you're using this image insert, you can set a maximum width. And I've done this here, and I've set it to 670 pixels, because if someone inserts an image into the body text of a node and it's really wide, like 1028, it's going to completely break the site, because that's going to be as wide as the entire theme is. So you can control the width of it by setting that maximum here. And then when it comes down to the global settings for this, I pretty much left everything alone, except I changed the number of values to unlimited rather than 1, because they might want to upload multiple images per post, and I want to allow them to do that. List field being disabled is fine. What that means is if you enabled list field, when someone uploads an image, you'll have the body text and all the information in the node, and then at the bottom you'll have a little table which actually lists the files that have been uploaded, and we don't want that. We want the images inserted, but we don't want to have a whole list of the image files. And same thing with description field. This allows for an optional description to be associated with the image. We don't need that in this instance either. So that's how I've set up my file field image field, so that people can upload an image and then insert it directly into the text area. So one other thing that we need to look at here is, aside from the field itself, is under display fields, we actually don't want this field to display. We want people to be able to upload images and then insert it wherever they want. We don't want it to be just a particular field that is appearing in the content type. We have a lot more information on like how this works in our content construction video that we have, but I just want to show you real briefly what I've done here is I've basically hidden this field by setting everything to hidden, so that when you upload the image field module is going to want to just put that into our node content, and we don't want that. We want our users to be able to control exactly where it goes. So now let's go see how that looks on our actual create content form. So I'll go to create content, news article, and I need to fill in my text again here. So and we'll pick a category. I'll make this services again. Got my lorem ipsum going on, just plain text. Now if we scroll down a little bit, we'll see that I actually have this post image field that I've added. And so I can upload an image, so I'll browse for an image. We have one sitting on the desktop here, so this is our headquarters. And then I'll just go ahead and upload that image. And you'll see image field is giving us this nice thumbnail preview so we can tell which image we have. Particularly important when you have multiple images, much easier to just see which image you want. But the important thing here is that we have this send to text area button. And this is what's going to allow us to just put it right into the middle of the body of our text without having to work very hard. So what I need to do is go up here and just pick the location where I want the image to be inserted. So I'm going to put my cursor here in the middle where I would like my image to appear, and then hit send to text area. And you can see I have the text, the image is in the middle, and then the text continues underneath. So, and we can even try resizing this. So let's make it small so it doesn't take up everything. Okay, so I have that added now. Let me go ahead and save this. And you'll notice the image is not there. It's not showing. Again, very common problem. This is the same problem we had before. We've added an image which is using the image HTML tag, and we don't have that in our input format. So again, Drupal's not showing it to us. So what we need to do is go back to our input formats and fix them up. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Administer, and down again under Site Configuration, we'll go to Input Formats. And again, I need to configure the filtered HTML, and then hit the Configure tab, so Configure. And we'll come down here, and again we have the our tags, so we added those, and now I need to add HTML image tag. And one thing to keep in mind when adding an image tag is that there are some security implications for that. It is a vector for mean, nasty people to inject bad scripts, but using the HTML image tag. So you need to be a little bit careful about not necessarily letting anybody willy-nilly use the image tag. It's a decision you can make. And on this site, basically our employees are the ones who are creating our content, and we trust them. So I'm going to go ahead and just add that tag so that our images will actually appear. So I'm going to save that. And now let's go back to our content and see if that helped. Go back to the full node so we can see all of it. And voila, we have an image, which is awesome, and it's in the right place in between the text. One thing you may notice though is that we had resized it when we were in the WYSIWYG, but this is the full size image, which is not exactly what we wanted. We want it to be smaller. So the way we're going to address that is, because that's not exactly a tag, an HTML tag, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to add another filter that will help us with resizing, and it's called Image Resize Filter. It's a pretty straightforward name. So I'm going to go ahead and enable this new module and then walk through how I'm going to set this up so that we can get that resize to work. So I'll go to Administer, Site Building, and Modules, because first we need to enable it. And I'll come down here to Other. It's in the Other section of the Modules page. Image Resize Filter. Check that off. Save it. Okay, so now we have this is saved. You notice we have some information up here, which is actually very helpful in terms of where we need to go. But I'm going to go through the normal steps. Whenever we enable a module, we typically are going to go back to Administer and look at the By Module page. That's the standard process we've been following. So when we scroll down here to the eye area in our listing, you'll notice there is no image resize filter here. So I don't quite know where the settings are for this. Now, one thing that's easy to not know or forget is that with filters, those are actually configured under the input format section because filters are parts of formats. And particularly with filters, but generally probably a good idea at this point would be to check the module itself and see if there's any install or readme text that can actually help me walk through the steps of what exactly I need to do, because it's not terribly clear at this point. I don't have my regular pointers. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my FTP client, and let's actually look into the module folder here and see what we have. Okay, so this is my FTP client. I'm in my Drupal root, so I'm going to go into where my modules are. And we'll come down here, image resize filter. And it does have a README file, so a very handy thing to know. Let me go ahead and open this up. If we look here, you'll see we actually have step-by-step installation instructions. So we've already, gotten the module there and we've enabled it. And it does tell us that we need to go to site configuration input formats to actually do configuration. If we go down here a little bit, we'll see step number 4 is really important because it tells us we actually need to use the rearrange tab, which we haven't looked at yet. And it tells us there are 2 things that we must do to ensure that this is going to work. The first thing is we need to make sure that the image tag is in the list of allowed tags. We've already just done that because we wanted our other image to appear, so we've got that step done. The second thing we need to do though is it's saying that the image resize filter needs to run before the HTML filter. So let's go look at this configuration stuff it's talking about and see how this all works. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my configuration for my input formats. So I'll go back to the by task screen and down here to input formats. Again, my filtered HTML format is the one I want to mess with here. So just on this main edit screen here, if we scroll down a little bit, we'll see we have that list of filters we saw earlier. And now we have a new filter that's available to us, which is the one we've just enabled. So it adds it, but it doesn't necessarily turn it on by default. We actually have to turn it on ourselves. So I'll go ahead and save that. And that returns us back to our input format screen. So let me go back in because I'm not done configuring, so we need to go back. Now the next tab would be configure. And again, some filters have settings, some filters don't. So I'm just going to come in here and see. Image resize does have settings, but actually the defaults are fine, so I'm actually not going to monkey with those at all. We'll just leave them alone. The defaults are good for us. Now the last thing we need to do, and this is the tab we haven't looked at before, is rearrange. And this was that important step that was in our README. Now, when it comes to rearranging, remember, a format consists of multiple filters, and each filter has an effect on the text. And they actually run in an order. So the order that's listed here is the order in which the text is modified. So right now, the URL filter goes first, so any links that are in there are automatically turned into clickable links. Then the HTML filter runs through and it strips out all those tags, and etc. It goes on. The line break converter then runs. So the order in which these filters run is very important because one filter might strip or modify something that another filter is trying to do if they're in the wrong order. So that's why that was noted as a very important step, because if we leave these in this order, image resize filter is not going to work properly and we're going to be very disappointed. So we need to go ahead and move this before the HTML filter. It's highlighted in yellow and it has my little asterisk here. I haven't saved my changes, so we definitely need to save our changes on this. Now, one thing before we leave this screen and go back to see if our image is actually working yet, I wanted to point out that the reason that this is working for us when we are resizing or rearranging or adding new filters, or even when you remove filters, the way that Drupal is storing that text, when we created our content, Drupal put all of that HTML into the database and saves it just the way it was written. Even if there's bad, nasty stuff, bad scripts, all of that stuff, it gets stored into the database just like that. All of these filters are running on display. So when Drupal pulls it out of the database and sends it to the browser, that is when all of these filters are running, and it's kind of, working on manipulating things. So that means that we don't ever lose data. So if someone types something in, you have that data and you can continue to manipulate it. And that's really great because basically if something doesn't work, like when we initially put the image in and it didn't show, it didn't strip the image out, like it didn't delete that. It saved it in the database, and then when we configured our filter to deal with it, then it appeared because it was still in the database. So that's just sort of one of those peace of mind things. And also you will find at times probably that you'll be working with the filters and rearranging them and stuff like that. So you have that space and flexibility to keep playing with it until you get it just right. Okay, so we've done our configuration, we've done our important rearrangement. So now let's see what our image is doing now. So I'm going to go back to news. And here's our post. And when I come down here, voila, it is now resized. So now our users can put the image into the text and they can resize it with just a little drag and drop handle, and then when they save it, everything's going to work and look just the way that they expected. Input formats in Drupal are very important, somewhat obscure. People don't often think of them and end up pulling out their hair for hours while they're trying to figure out why things don't look right. So just make sure you keep that in mind, especially when you're working with something like WYSIWYG, which is also affecting the text that's being input into the site. This chapter has sort of gone through the basic tasks that you're going to need to do when it comes to working with the input formats, how to rearrange them, where the configuration is, and such like that, so that you can really set your site up so that it's not so frustrating for your users to get their work done that they need to do.
Something that'll come up frequently when you're dealing with Drupal websites is the ability to make some content on the site private and some content on the site public. For our particular clients' needs, what they want is sort of a combination of an intranet slash a sort of brochureware site. They want a place where they can upload their sort of company, family photos, and internal memos in a way that it won't be accessible by their customers. So this section will talk all about access control in Drupal as it relates to content and how to configure it properly and how to troubleshoot it if something goes wrong. So while we were away, I made a few changes to the site. I've created a couple of views and some content types, one for gallery, which shows a list of photos and a grid, and one for internal memos, which is for a new internal memo content type. And so these listing pages look fine, but the problem is that if I switch user into customer, I can still see them. I can see all our embarrassing photos, and I can also read all the internal memos. And that isn't good. I'm going to go ahead and log back in as the admin user. So these two menu items are created by the Views module. So one obvious place to look for a place to control access would be in the view itself. I'm going to hover over this view and I get these nice little links here, and one of them is Edit. And this will take me directly to the Views Edit page where I can change the settings. One of the settings that Views provides is this one called Access. If I click on Unrestricted, which is what it is right now, I can choose to restrict the view by permission or by role. So since I already have nice roles set up for employee and admin, I can choose role and then check off the admin and employee roles, and that will restrict the access to the gallery to those users only. I'll save the view. And now when I return to the gallery page and change to the customer, so I'll see that I get an access denied page where I used to see the photo gallery, and I no longer see the link to the gallery in the primary links menu. So you might think, great, that's taken care of. But a really crafty customer might do something like guess the URL to our page and type in photos/mat by themselves. And we can see that even as customer, I can still see the picture itself. And that's not good. So we saw earlier that Drupal provides very fine-grained permissions for controlling just about everything, you know, from access the menu at the top of the page to switch users in the devel menu here, and so on. So it might be an obvious place to look to, you know, deny access to viewing these nodes from the permissions page. So I've logged in as admin, and let's try that. I'll go to Administer, and underneath User Management, I'll go to the Permissions section. And I'll go down to Node Module, which is where all these sort of permissions are all centralized. What I see in here is I see a variety of very fine-grained permissions. I can create article content, I can delete any article content, I can edit my own, I can edit any, all of these sorts of things. But something I don't see is I don't see view on any of those. And I also, the only really view-related permission I see is this access content, which is global and applies to any content on the entire site. Drupal core doesn't provide a means of doing role-based access to viewing content. What Drupal core does provide is a variety of APIs so that any contributed module that wants to can dive in there and set up its own type of access control. That is a lot more fine-grained than what core offers out of the box. So we've gone ahead and downloaded one of these modules. We've downloaded one called the private module. So under the module configuration page, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to the other category and turn on the private module. You'll see this screen pop up for a second there that says Rebuilding Content Access Permissions. Anytime you enable one of these node access modules, as they're called, you'll see this screen pop up for a moment there that says it's rebuilding the content permissions. What this basically means is it's setting Drupal up to be able to do fine-grained per node permissions to view, as opposed to the global everyone can see everything or can't type of thing that it does. One important troubleshooting tip is if you ever have issues with some content being private when it ought to be or it ought not to be, or something like that, if you go under Administer, Content Management, and Post Settings, there will be a Rebuild Permissions button. In general, you don't really need to go in here and press this button. It's really only a troubleshooting measure if some kind of weird thing happens where something was marked private and is still visible or something like that, which doesn't tend to happen very often, but it can happen, especially if you're playing around with different node access modules, such as organic groups, taxonomy access control. If you have multiple access modules on your same site, sometimes they can not interact with each other well. You'll run across access problems. This will rebuild the permissions so they're back in a stable state. If I go under content types, I can see that what the private module did is on each of these content types, I'll just choose photo as our example here. If I click edit, so I can see under workflow settings, privacy module has added some more options here. I have 4 to choose from. Disabled always public and hidden always private means I'm not going to present the content editor with any choice. I'm just going to force all content to either always be public or always be private. With either of these two options, I will give them a checkbox so they can choose on a per content item basis whether to make something public or private, but I choose which way it defaults. So for most content on my site, I'm just going to leave this disabled and just leave it public. For example, all the pages on my site I want to be public, all of the newsletters and things like that, those should always be public. But in this case, for a photo where I only want the employees and the admins of the site to be able to view them, I'm going to go ahead and set this to hidden, always private, so it's not possible to uncheck that and make public photos. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And then I'll arrive back at the content types page that says the photo has been updated. One important thing to note, when I change a workflow setting or any of the other defaults on the content types page like that, that is not retroactive to the existing content that I have. So what I'll need to do is go under Administer Content Management Content to my big list of content. I'll limit the type by photo. So I'll go ahead and select all of these photos. And something the private module did, which was really nice, is under the update options, it added a couple of options, mark as private and mark as public. So I can do this in bulk and mark all of these things as private at once. Once in a while, when you choose one of the options here, it doesn't quite do the full node save to update all the content. So just as a basic troubleshooting measure, something you can also do, like all of these are published at the moment, I'm just going to go ahead and republish them just to really make it clear that I want to save all of that content. So if I go back to the gallery and I log in as the customer, I'll see that I continue to get access denied on the gallery page, and it's not visible in the menu. And if I manually try and go to Photos Mat and be sneaky, I will also get an access denied error. When I log in as the admin user, I'll see that the content does appear, and I get the little key next to it that indicates that it's private. So the next step would be to repeat all of these things for the internal memos, add the access control to the view, mark all of those contents as private, and then test it by logging in as customer and then back again as someone who should have access to it. We won't show that here, but that would be the next step to do. There's one more thing that I wanted to touch on, which is the fact that these images are here. However, one more sneaky trick I could do is look at the actual path to the full image. So, if a user somehow manages to guess sites, default, files, image cache, large size photo, meta.jpg, you're in for a big treat. Now, depending on how sensitive the information on your site is, this might be totally not acceptable. In our case, we're not really going to worry about it because that's a pretty far-fetched thing and the pictures aren't that embarrassing. But if you are in a situation where you have very private content that you don't want users to be able to access, the way to handle that would be Drupal's private file handling. One more layer of access that Drupal offers is the ability to make file handling private as well. If we can go check that out, I'll just hit the back button here and log in back as the admin again. If I go under Administer, Site Configuration, File System, here I can set a number of different file settings, including the path to the files as well as the download method. Drupal offers two means of file protection out of the box, either public or private. These methods will apply to all of the uploaded files on your site, so it's sort of global. Either everything is public or everything is private. When you choose the private method, what happens is two things. One, Drupal will follow any of these sort of node access constraints. So if a file is attached to an unpublished node or it's attached to a node that's marked private by a module such as private module, then what will happen is you won't be able to access the file if you don't have access to the parent node to which it's attached. However, in order to get that access control, every time someone clicks on one of the file links, it's going to incur another full bootstrap of Drupal in order to check the access. So there can be big performance trade-offs with the private option. And the last thing, if you're going to use the private option, you'll want to change your file system path to something that's not web accessible, because otherwise Apache will happily serve that file for you if it exists, even if Drupal would otherwise say it shouldn't. In our particular case, we don't really care if people see pictures of Matt, so we're just going to go ahead and leave this as public and hope that people aren't very savvy at guessing our URLs. So in this section, we discussed all about making things private in Drupal, how to make listing pages private, nodes private, and files as well. Drupal Contrib offers tons of flexible modules to do access control in all sorts of different ways. For example, the Organic Groups module lets you assign big buckets of nodes called groups, and you can assign users to those and tags and all kinds of other things. There's also the Taxonomy Access Control module, which will let you determine visibility of content by the taxonomy terms that are attached to it, and many, many other options. Learning the ropes of these modules is a good thing to do in order to get the most flexibility for the content needs that you have.
So now that we've got our site mostly set up, let's get our search working. If we try and search on the current site, we've got a welcome page here. I will search for welcome, and we would hope that we would get a result here. However, what we're getting is your search yielded no results. This is because Drupal has not yet indexed our website. It hasn't gone through and read all of the text on the website from all of the content and indexed it into the database. Drupal does this task as sort of a background task on a periodic basis using what Drupal calls the cron system. You probably noticed throughout this video in the administration section, when we go to the admin page, there's a big message up the top here that says cron has not run. This is that same thing. Drupal uses an actual URL on the site at cron.php, C-R-O-N, that when this web page gets called, all of the cron jobs, all of the modules that have periodic tasks that need to be run, usually processor-intensive tasks like building the search index or oftentimes sending status emails, cleaning up the database in other ways, things like that, all run through this cron system. I'm going to click on the status report link and we'll get a little bit more information about the cron tasks. Here it's saying that the cron maintenance tasks have never been run. This is true. We haven't run them on our site. We can actually run cron manually by clicking on this link, but we actually, what we want to do is configure cron, which is actually a Unix function, to run on a periodic basis so that all of these maintenance tasks will happen in an automated way on our website. So looking at the root of our Drupal installation, there are a few files in here that are super helpful. You may have already opened the install.txt file if you were installing Drupal for the first time. There's a lot of super useful information in here. Let's take a look. So in this file, we have information about the PHP requirements for Drupal. We have information about how to download Drupal, which is kind of funny because if you have this file, you've probably already downloaded Drupal. And it goes on to sort of walk you through creating your database, how to run the installation script and configure Drupal for the first time, the permission settings that you need to use in order to make sure that all the files are in the right place with the right permissions for the files directory and stuff like that. And here's this section. Section 7 is the cron maintenance tasks. In this section, there's the function that you can run in your cron system to call this cron.php file on the site using the wget function and run cron. These when you call the cron.php URL, all of these maintenance tasks get run. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take and copy this part of this function. This other stuff will come in important in a second, but let me just show you what I'm going to do. If you're familiar with the command line and cron tabs and all that kind of thing, this should be a very straightforward process for you to set up. However, lots of people like myself are not familiar with that. But if you have a web host that has a control panel similar to the cPanel setup, this cPanel setup is very common. There are a lot of other systems that are very similar to this. You will hopefully be able to configure some cron jobs for your website, and we're going to just go in and do that here. I can either use the cPanel standard method. I'm going to use the Unix style because it mirrors what we've got over here on our page. So again, referring to this, what we see is there's a 0 and then a bunch of asterisks, and then this function. So we've got here a 0, and we want to change all of these to asterisks, and I'll explain what those mean in just a second. And then we want to paste in our function that we're going to run. This here URL should actually be the actual URL of your website. I'm going to just copy ours from the URL here, and I will paste it in here. Okay, and then I will. I'm going to commit this and then explain to you what all those numbers mean. So here, what we're seeing is this is telling us that on the 0 minute, so the o'clock of every hour of every day of every month and every weekday, this function is going to be called. And this is the wget function, which is a web get. It gets things from the web. And it's being called with this -q here so that it has quiet output. It won't output errors and things like that. So basically, there's nothing that'll ever be emailed out with errors and stuff like that. And it's just going to call this cron.php. So basically, it's just calling a web page every hour of every day. And you could change this if you had a server where everything was happening right on the hour. You could change that here, that kind of thing. And now every hour the cron job will run on our website. I could wait for that to happen. Let's see if it's happened yet. It has not happened yet. We haven't crossed an hour mark. Or I could run cron manually. I'm going to do that here. I will run cron once. And you can see that running cron actually is a relatively time-intensive thing. It's going through and building the search engine and also getting syndicated content using the aggregator module. Let's do that search, and we'll go back to the home page and see if anything's come up. So, welcome. And there we go. We've got a search result there. Our welcome page has come up in the search results. Drupal search system has a few settings which you can configure. Let's go in and take a look at what those are. If I go under Administer, Site Configuration, Search Settings, I've got this page. And this page actually gives me some really useful information. It says that 100% of the site has been indexed. So when we ran that cron job, all of the site was indexed. And we could re-index the site by clicking this button here. We also have this option here for the number of items, the number of content items to index when the cron run gets run. That cron system that we set it up to run every hour, but you could set it up to run every 10 minutes or whatever you like, really whatever's appropriate for the traffic and the needs of your website. Keep in mind, though, that is the sort of the processor intensive stuff that's happening. So you kind of need to balance that out when you start thinking about the performance stuff for your site. Depending on how often your cron run is running and how much new content you get posted to your website, you might want to adjust this. But for sort of a medium to small size website, 100 items is probably about right. We also have some options here to change the minimum word length. So the minimum word length of words that will get indexed is 3 letters. So it will index words of 3 letters or more. So words like a, an, and be, won't get indexed in this system. You can lower this down if for some reason you wanted to be sure to index those kinds of words. There's also a checkbox here for Chinese, Japanese, and Korean tokenizer-based overlapping sequences. Drupal handles UTF-8 extended characters like Japanese and Chinese and Korean characters. And the way that these are stored in the database lots of times is not just as one character, but oftentimes as multiple characters. So when you talk about words and characters in Drupal and in the database and in things like indexing the search, things start to get kind of different when you start to get into these character sets. We're not dealing with any of this kind of stuff on our website. There will be probably very little Chinese, Japanese, or Korean characters, but it's probably best to just leave that checked the way it is. There's also options here at the bottom for content ranking. So basically, you have different factors here. Keyword relevance, which is the actual keywords that a person searched for. And then you can also add extra weight for whether the post was posted recently, whether the node, the content item was recently posted content, and the number of comments on it. And it's usually just fine to kind of leave these the way they are, but if you wanted, for instance, more recent content to get a lot more to show up higher in your search results, you could crank this up to a higher value, or if you wanted to weight things more importantly or less importantly based on the number of comments things are getting, you could change that here. I haven't really actually made any changes on this page, so I'll hit save anyways, just for kicks. And so now we've got the search working on the site. Let's do a search for something else. I've got a whole lot of lorem ipsum content here, so if I say lorem here, we can go through and find, and you can see that it's highlighting. We get the bold words lorem inside of things. We don't actually have any content with lorem as the title of the content. It's important to note that the search results will honor the access that the user has to this content. So we've used the private module to have some of the content on the website be not publicly accessible. If an anonymous user comes to the website, or someone that is even logged in that doesn't have permission to see those things, they won't actually see those things in the search results. The search also has these advanced options where you can do searches containing any of the words, or containing the phrase, or containing none of the words, or you can search only within a specific category, or only of specific types of content. These options are certainly advanced, especially when you're starting to expose the different types of content that you have on your website to the users, or showing all of the categories on your website. I don't know if every site will want to necessarily turn on the advanced search. Usually the normal conventional search is just fine. Drupal also has a search system for searching users. This is permissioned, as is the content search. There's permissions on the permission page, so you can choose which roles are able to use advanced search or able to use conventional search. Also, which roles are able to do user search. User search only actually searches for specific usernames, so I can search for any user with the word web in their name. And I'll show, there's the webmaster. Yeah, so you also have the user search, which is pretty simple. The Drupal content search is pretty extensive. There are some other options out there. Apache Solr is a very popular one. It's an external Java-based system, which can be hosted elsewhere on a separate website, and does a really good job of creating some really complex, faceted search kinds of things. If you're looking for a more advanced search system, definitely look into the Apache Solr kinds of stuff. Or people will oftentimes even wire in Google into their own website for using for the search. If you want to do that, Google's obviously a big name in search. But that's how the search that comes with Drupal works. And now you understand how to set up the cron system, and you're one step closer to Drupal magnificence.
So now we have our site built out, we've created content, made our listings, we have all of our features and functionality, and now we're getting ready to launch our site. This chapter is just going to go through a little checklist of things that we should cover before we actually go to launch. So to start this off, I'm going to go to our favorite administer area. And in here, there are going to two things under site configuration that I want to cover. The first one is error reporting. So go into error reporting here. This isn't something we've looked at before. I don't need this for launch, but I'll just cover this very briefly here. You can set a custom page to display if visitors to the site hit a 403, which is access denied, or a 404, which means a page has not been found on the site. I don't need to set this for launch, but it's just a nice option to know that it's here if you wanted to create a custom page for those. The real thing I'm looking at here is down here we have an error reporting setting. Now while we've been building the site, we've had this set to write errors to the log and to the screen. So this means whenever there are problems on the site, it's being logged into our watchdog, but it's also going to display on the screen. When we go to put this site into production, though, we really don't want our end users to be seeing errors. Oftentimes they're cryptic, kind of scary, sort of freaks people out. So since we know what we're doing and we have access to the logs, we'll be fine to be able to look at things in the logs. So we're going to turn these off to the screen and make them only go to the log, and that way our users won't get a little freaked out when they see that kind of a thing. So I'm going to set that and save it. And then I have one other section in Administer that I want to look at. So go back here and we'll come down to Performance. So in looking at the performance area, we're not going to get greatly into depth on performance. It's a whole topic in and of itself. But Drupal core does come with some basic things that you can do to help trim up the server load on your site. So we're going to walk through these and change a few of these settings just to get our site ready to go. So the first area here is this page cache. And what the page cache is going to do is that when an anonymous visitor comes to see the site, mostly the content's going to be the same, and so what it'll do is cache a copy of that HTML and then just serve that directly when an anonymous visitor comes, rather than having to go into the database, process all of it, build the page, and then display it to the user. So we've had this disabled while we've been in development, which is a really good idea because you're changing a lot of things on the site while you're developing it and building it out. And if you have things cached, you won't necessarily always see your changes. That can be very frustrating because you don't necessarily realize why you're not seeing your changes. So it is good to leave it disabled while you're working, but once you get ready to launch, you do want to turn this on. Now there are two settings. There's normal and there's aggressive. You'll notice aggressive says experts only, and there are possible side effects. So unless you have a really, really high load and you sort of know what you're doing in terms of caching, we should probably avoid this. So I'm just going to go ahead and set it to normal, and that'll give our site a boost already. We also have a few other settings here. Oh, and you'll also notice we have this little notice that's appearing. Basically it's saying that the Devel module is not compatible with aggressive mode. So we're not putting on aggressive, and we're going to talk about Devel module in a few minutes here. So we can go by this for now. The minimum cache lifetime, the way that it all works by default is that a page would be cached and just served up immediately. Whenever you add content to the site or make an edit to the site, that cache would be cleared, and then it would have to reset again. If you have a heavy traffic site, and you don't want to have the cache cleared every single time an edit is made, you can create a delay if you want to. So you could say that there's going to be a delay of 5 minutes. So when we cache something, we're holding on to it for 5 minutes, even if things have changed. So setting this can cause confusion for your users if they're creating a lot of content or making a lot of edits, because for 5 minutes those changes aren't going to show up. This is especially disconcerting when you have things like anonymous users who are leaving comments because their comments don't appear until that cache clears. So you should be really careful about setting this and sort of know what you're doing if you need to do that, or you might end up disorienting your users. So the last thing we have here is page compression. So the setting at the top was just to cache a page, and page compression will actually compress this into like a zip and then deliver that to the browser. And so we have that enabled as well. The server can do it. It's a nice easy win in terms of performance. So I'm going to leave that one enabled. The next section is the block cache, and you'll actually notice I can't select anything here. This has been grayed out, and the explanation is actually underneath in this little help text area. But it's basically because we have the private module enabled. There's a module that is defining content access restrictions, and it won't allow us to turn on the block caching due to that. The reason for that is because the block might be updating with information, and if I'm an authenticated user and I have access to various, nodes like our gallery and such, and if any of that stuff was displaying in a block, and then I was to log out, any anonymous user might see that if that particular page got cached. So we don't want to have that turned on at all if we are doing various things about restricting access. So Drupal knows that we have this module enabled and has gone ahead and told us we aren't allowed to set this anyway. So we can go ahead and go by this. But if you don't have any kind of content access restrictions, again, this is a nice little performance boost. For your anonymous users, they'll just see the same cached block, and that will save hits to your database. The next area we have here is bandwidth optimizations. This is optimizing your CSS and JavaScript files. When you have a lot of different CSS files, and in a typical Drupal installation, you're going to have a fair number. Your theme has its, style CSS, and it might have other CSS files. And then various modules are including their CSS files. And so you can end up with a long list of a lot of different CSS files in the head of your HTML. And what optimizing the CSS does is it actually smooshes them all together into one file so that your browser only has to request that one CSS file rather than, say, 20 of them. It can also do, well, it's called compressed here, sort of using the same word for two different things. This is not creating a zip file, but CSS compression just removes all the white space. Because of the syntax of CSS, it all still works just fine without white space, but oftentimes in CSS files we add lots of white space just to make them human readable for us. But for the browser, it doesn't care. And that just helps save a little extra, a few bytes here and there. Same thing with JavaScript, except it doesn't do that space compression. But optimizing your JavaScript files does the same thing, where it'll take multiple JavaScript files and sort of put them all into one so that everything just runs at one time. So we're going to go ahead and enable these because these are really easy wins, and it's a really nice thing to just be able to turn that on. The last thing we have down here isn't a setting, but I do want to talk about what this is. This button here will clear all of your cache data. So we've set up all of these things to be cached. And Drupal is also additionally doing some of its own caching of various things in the code, unrelated to the page caching that we saw at the top. So every so often, something might look funny on your site, particularly if you're working with themes. If you make some changes, you might not see them. And if you go ahead and manually use this button to clear the cache, suddenly you'll see everything again, and it can help reset certain things. So you might end up using this a lot while you're site building or doing development and that kind of a thing. And it's a nice handy button to know. Sometimes things look funny, clearing the cache fixes everything suddenly and it looks good again. The only caveat to this is that especially when the site's up and live and running, when you hit this clear cache button, realize you're going to clear everything that's been cached, and Drupal's going to have to rebuild all those cached items, and that can have a performance hit on your site depending on the traffic and how much stuff you have cached. So you should at least think about it before you go ahead and hit that button on a live site, and you should probably only do that if you're having like real problems and you're just trying to figure out something that might need to be reset somewhere. So I'm not going to hit it now because I don't need to, but I just wanted to point out what that was. So I've done those settings, so I need to make sure I save them. So I'll save that. And there we go. So that's two things I've done so far, the error reporting, and now I've set up some performance things. So now, instead of actual settings, we just have a few little things we need to double check. The first of those being cron. In the search section we talked about setting up cron and why it's important to run cron and etc. So all I want to do is just make sure that cron's running. When you're building the site and doing development, sometimes it's something you look at and you sort of set up or play with or something, but you don't really pay attention to. And this is particularly important if you develop the site in one place and then move it to another. Make sure cron is running when the site goes live. It's very important, not just for search, but for all these other reasons about cron. So what I'm going to do to check if cron is running, you could check on your server in various ways depending on your server setup, but I can also go down here to reports in the administrator area. And the first one, it's created my little directories now that I've turned on that optimization for CSS and JavaScript. So recent log entries will show me what's the latest stuff that's been going on my site. And you'll see we have a lot of stuff here. You'll see down here we do have an entry for cron, so that's cool. Another way though, because there's a lot of stuff that comes into this log, you can actually filter the log messages. And so if I go into the filter here, I can say I just want to see cron, because that's what I'm trying to check here. I'm not interested in all the other stuff right now. So if I filter it by cron, then I can come down and see if cron has been running regularly and that kind of a thing. So cron looks like it's running. I think we're good. But just always double check that, because it's an easy thing to sort of forget or to get lost in the shuffle, and then a little while down the road your site starts getting sluggish or people aren't finding the search results and all kinds of weird things start to happen. So just double check that one. Okay, so we only have a few things left. One thing I definitely want to make sure I take care of before I launch this site is this switch user block. Remember, we turned the switch user block on so that we could go in and out and see how things were looking for various people. So we've given all of these people the ability to switch the user block, including anonymous, which is really bad in terms of security. And keep in mind that anybody that has access to this block has access to this link right here, admin. So any of them can switch to the admin role and have complete control over your site. We need to turn that off. So I'm going to change the permissions on this block. Rather than just turning it off, I'm going to actually change the permissions first. And the reason for that is if for some reason I turn it back on, we want to have it set to the most secure permissions so that we don't have to remember to reset those when we turn it back on, because we might forget that. So let's go take care of that. So I'll go down to Administer User Management, because we're going to go to Permissions. So the permissions I'm looking for, the switch user block, if you recall, is under the Devel module. The Devel module is the module that's actually creating that block for us. So I'm going to go down here to Devel, and here you can see the switch user's permission, and it's checked for everybody. That's bad. So we're going to uncheck this for everyone except for admin, because our admin role, they can use it, and that's fine. If we turn the block on and suddenly admin can switch to admin, I think we're okay. But we want to turn it off for everybody else. So let me go down here and save that. Voila. And now you'll see that these are not italicized anymore because these users can't switch back to us. Admin and webmaster can switch back and forth, so that's fine. We're good there. The very last thing that I want to do is turn off the Devel module. It's been a great help. It's given us some cool tools. It's very good when you're building and developing, but it's doing a lot of things in the background. It's using up resources, and on a live site we really don't need it enabled. So we're going to turn it off. That'll take away our switch user block, and it'll stop taking, running its reports and doing those things in the background that are using up some resources. So that, I just need to go to my modules administration, which is under site building, and modules. And then we just need to go down here to Devel and turn these off. We also don't need Devel generate anyway, so we'll turn those both off and click Save Configuration. And you'll notice switch user block is gone, and we've done just another little performance tweak for our site. So in this chapter, we just went through a very basic checklist of easy to forget but really important things that you should make sure you write down and make sure you do them. Before we get ready to launch a site, we want to make sure that we cover some basic performance and security. When you're working in your development environment and you're building your site and you're working with trusted users, it's very comfortable and it's very easy to forget that you need to take care of these things. But you want to make sure that once you launch that site, it is both secure and performant, and it's a smooth experience for everyone.
Drupal is really powerful open source software that lets you make the websites of your dreams, though one of the things that you need to do with any Drupal site is make sure that it's kept up to date with security releases and new module releases. This is something that can be a little bit daunting if you're just starting out, but it's something that's really important to make sure that your site stays secure and up to date. While navigating through the administration panel, you might at one point see a message that says something like this: one or more problems were detected with your Drupal installation. Check the status report for more information. Another thing you may have seen, and hopefully not very often, is that there's a security update available for your version of Drupal. And to ensure the security of your server, you should update immediately. So let's go ahead and click on this available updates page. And if I scroll down the list here, I see I have a couple of issues here. Drupal core itself has a security update. I'm currently running Drupal 6.12 and I need to upgrade to 6.13. Also, the Content Construction Kit module has a recommended version of 2.4 and I'm only running 2.3. Visually, the security updates are red and very, there's a red X there, it's bold, it's really trying to draw your attention to it, because those are really important. You want to make sure that you're always up to date on security releases. When a module says only an update is available, that means that generally it's a more minor release. It has, perhaps some bug fixes, maybe a couple of new features. So those you can kind of take your time on updating, though you might want to try it out and see if it offers new features that you need on your website. Update status will also inform you if there's a new development release of a module available. These version numbers can get a little bit crazy, so let's just take a moment just to dissect these a little bit. When you see 6.x, that's indicating which version of Drupal core the module is compatible with. So all of the modules on our site are compatible with version 6.x or Drupal 6. There's also 5.x modules which are compatible with Drupal 5, and really old modules that are 4.7.x which are compatible with Drupal 4.7. The next part of the version number, such as 1.5 or 3.0 Alpha 1, is which version of the module that you're using. In general, modules have a 1.0 release, and then as new bug fixes come out, they'll make 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and so on. If a module goes under serious development, they might raise the major version, as this one has, from 1.5 to 3.0. Those usually indicate major API changes and major functionality changes, so you want to evaluate a move like that a little bit more carefully than you would a move just from one point version to the other. So let's upgrade the CCK module since it's a little bit easier to tackle. We'll begin by clicking on the release notes. What the release notes will give is a rundown of all of the things that have happened since the old version and to the new version. So you can see that this release fixes some bugs, adds support for panels, removes some sort of multi-group feature, and so on. And there's a really detailed list of the bugs that were fixed, which is handy if you're into all that kind of detail. The kinds of things that you're looking for here are things that, if you were using something like this multi-group feature, it'd be really important to know that that's leaving, so you don't upgrade your module and have your site break. Also, it's really nice to see if any of these other notes apply to you. So just good to kind of give a general overview of what you're actually going to install before you install it. I'll hit the back button and arrive back at the Update Modules page. The next thing I'm going to do is click the download link and go ahead and just save that to my desktop. I'll go ahead and navigate to my desktop and extract that file. There are many different strategies to upgrading Drupal. In a situation where you're doing just a minor point release update from 2.3 to 2.4, as we are here, there shouldn't be too many changes to worry about in terms of shifting APIs or major features removed or things like that. But in a major version from, say, a 2.3 to a 3.1 or a 3 point something, then you want to tread a little bit more lightly. A lot of times what people do, and this is generally a best practice, is have actual 2 copies of their site. Perhaps one on their local computer as well as the live one, or if you've got the resource available to you, have what's called a staging server, which is a direct copy of everything on the live site that you try things out on first before you deploy it live. Those are all really, really good ideas to have, and we highly recommend it. But before we get started with any of this upgrade process, what we really ought to do is start taking some backups. So there are 2 steps to backing up your site. One is backing up the files, which include not only the sort of modules and core itself that you've uploaded, but also any custom stuff that you have, custom themes, custom modules, as well as your configuration files, things like settings.php, .htaccess, some of these other sort of system files that you can sometimes customize in order to make your site sort of work on whatever hosting platform you're on. Also included with the rest of your website's files are your actual uploaded files, your user uploaded files, making sure you have a backup of those as well. The second important piece of any backup strategy is backing up the database. The database contains all of your content, your users, your settings, basically everything that makes your website your website. So it's really, really important to make sure that that's part of a comprehensive backup strategy before you begin any upgrade process. So let's begin with the first step. I'll open up my FTP client here. We're going to take a backup of all of the Drupal files. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and move up in my web directory to the public HTML file, or it might be called www on your server, but basically where all of your Drupal files live, that folder, and just copy it down to my desktop. Since FTP can take quite a long time to do this backup, if your hosting company offers you shell access, another way to do it is from the command line. So here I'm logged in with my user into my website. If I do ls, I can see public HTML there, and all of my website files are right here. I can do a command called tar, so tar. Then there are some command line arguments to it. What I'm trying to do here is basically make a big zip file of everything that's on my server. So I'll do tar z c v f. Of course, z is for z compression. C is for compress as opposed to expand the file. V verifies it, and I don't honestly remember what F does, but that's what we use. Then you type in the name. So I'll do something like public html.tar.gz, and then the name of the directory that I'm backing up, which is public HTML. And when I enter that, I'll see a whole bunch of stuff fly past the screen. What it's doing is basically taking the entire contents of my website and chucking it into a big archive, which takes seconds to do. Now I can go back to my FTP client and just download this one file, which has everything in it, as opposed to waiting for every single file to download. One way or another, either by downloading all these files through FTP or from downloading the tar.gz file we made in the earlier step from the shell, you should have a copy of your public HTML or www or whatever it's called on your server. Basically, you should have a copy of the directory that contains all of your Drupal files sitting somewhere on your computer. So checking some things to make sure that, for example, the sites folder is there. Of particular importance are making sure the settings.php files here. That's what allows Drupal to connect to your database. And also of particular importance is this files directory here. This was all of the user uploaded content on your site. So you can see all of our photos are here, all of the sort of image cache resized versions of the photos, and lots of other stuff. If this folder goes missing, you're missing a great deal of content on your site, so you want to make sure that that is nice and safe. Also in this sites directory, which basically makes your site, is in the all folder we have the libraries we installed for the WYSIWYG, we have modules, all of the modules that are on our site are all here, and we have the custom themes that we downloaded as well. So all of that stuff also gets backed up, which is really important. And finally, there are some system files such as robots.txt and another one called .htaccess, which you may have made modifications to. It's important to have those backed up as well. A lot of operating systems, such as OS X, don't show .htaccess files, but what you can sometimes do in a pinch is look for it in your FTP client, like this. that can be a tricky file to track down, so make sure that you have it backed up at all times. So our files look like they're in good shape. So let's go ahead and move to the second step of the backup process, which is the database backup. There's actually a really handy module. I'm going to go under Administer Site Building Modules and turn on a module called the Backup and Migrate module. This is down here in the Other section. Let that save. The Backup and Migrate module will put its stuff under Administer Content Management, Backup and Migrate. As you can see, Drupal's very insistent about that security update. We'll have to take care of that in a moment. This module is great. What it does is it allows you to back up and export your database from a nice, simple web interface. It even does some basic things like eliminate the data from tables such as cache, cache page, cache views, devel queries, search data set, and search index. Some of these tables that can get really large and you really don't need them in order to recreate your database. You can also specify a backup file name. By default, it's just the site name, but there's also a variety of replacement patterns you can use. For example, the date and the year that the backup was taken. You can also specify some compression to make it go a little bit faster, and either download it or save to the files directory. I recommend not saving to the files directory, since the files directory in our case is not a private files thing. We don't have it outside of the web accessible directory. That would mean that anyone could get a copy of your database, and that would be bad. So we'll go ahead and just download it. And click Backup. And go ahead and save that to our desktop. Another way to back up the database is through a tool called phpMyAdmin. This is commonly installed on different hosting environments. If I click the Export tab, I can select all tables and have a variety of options. Normally you can just sort of leave these as defaults. I usually click Save As File, gzipped again to make it go a little bit faster, and click the Go button. I'll go ahead and click that to save that to my desktop. Great, our database is now backed up, so we should be good. I'm going to go ahead and tab over to my desktop here. What I'm going to do here is just rename the public HTML to something a little more clear. So this is going to be, something like my website 6.12 for the version of Drupal that was installed back then. And then it's going to be, backup, and then the date, which is 2009-07-16. Just to give a little bit more information, if I ever need to restore from a backup, I'll be able to tell which files came from what. I also like to do that with my database backup as well. You'll notice that I have two copies of sql.gz here. This one is bigger because it came from phpMyAdmin and it didn't cut out stuff from the cache tables and Watchdog and things like that. If you have the means, something you should really do at this point is pull these backups into sort of a test site, either on another server or on your local computer, just to make sure that they're working properly, because you don't want to be caught in a situation where your site gets broken during an update and you don't have a safe backup to restore back to. Now that we've got our backups in place and we're all good, let's go ahead and start the actual upgrade process. We'll go back to Drupal itself. The first step in any upgrade process is to log in as user 1. If I click on my account and you hover over the edit link here, I'll see that I'm at user 1 edit. That's a good sign. It means I'm the super user and I can perform the update process. User 1 is the only user who can do the upgrades by default. However, if you are not user 1 and you don't have access, there's a workaround for you as well. Second step is go ahead and make sure that you've put your site into maintenance mode. Down under Administer Site Configuration, there's an option called Site Maintenance. In here you can set your site to offline and also enter in a little bit of a message that says something like the website is undergoing routine maintenance. Be back shortly. Once you save this, what happens is anywhere that you navigate on the site, you'll be told you're operating in offline mode. If you log out and simulate an anonymous user, this is what you see. You see whatever the maintenance theme page is, and you get told that the site is offline. There's no blocks, there are no menus, nothing fancy at all, so Drupal is basically working with the bare bones stuff. This is generally a good idea because when you're upgrading, you're replacing files, sometimes you're deleting files, or new files are, it's looking for new files that haven't been added yet. So your website can sometimes exhibit sort of scary looking errors that could scare your users away. You also don't want people adding content to the database and stuff while it's being upgraded. So in general, this is a good rule of thumb to always do before you perform any maintenance tasks. However, you'll notice that there are no login blocks, which means you can't log in either. In order to log in as the administrative user, type /user at the end of the URL, and that will bring you back to the login form. And as long as you log in as a user that has administrative privileges, specifically anybody with administer site configuration permissions, you'll be able to log into the site just fine. So you're logged in as user 1, you have the site in offline mode, you're ready to go. So we'll bring back up our FTP client. And navigate up to where we've downloaded the CCK module and pop it into our site's all modules folder. Generally speaking, you can just sort of override the existing files that are there, especially if it's a point release like a 2.3 to 2.4. Occasionally, though, that can get you into trouble, so what you can do as a safety net is to delete the folder altogether and just update it with clean versions every time. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and delete this file, since we have it all backed up, right? Okay, so now that we've got that deleted, we're going to go ahead and go up a level. We'll just drag our CCK folder into the modules directory. Great, so the update's completed. If I go into the modules file, I'll see our new CCK module there. Now back in Drupal land, what I want to do is run a script we haven't encountered before called update.php. At this point, it's going to tell us to do a Drupal database update. Not every time when you update a module will there be a database update, but it's a good idea just to run this just to be on the safe side, because it'll do things like clear out any caches that might have old data hanging around or anything else that could possibly cause a problem. So I'll click continue. On this screen, you can see we have a select versions, which is collapsed right now. If I expand this, it'll show me all the modules I have installed, as well as whether or not any updates are available for them. If there are updates available, what you'll see is generally a number like this, which indicates that there's a database update that it's found. While you can expand these and go back and rerun previous updates, in general that's really not recommended. You should generally just leave this whole thing collapsed and just proceed with pressing the update button. What the update functions will do is it'll perform any data changes that need to happen. For example, if a new table gets added, or if a column gets renamed, or if the way that the module's data gets stored is changed, the module updates will take care of all of that stuff for you. So the only thing you have to worry about is backing up your own database and making sure the new code is in place. Great, our database update has completed. We don't see any errors here. We can also check the error log here, which will take us to the reports section, where if there were any problems during the update, you'll see kind of big red errors down here. As a troubleshooting measure, if you ever go to update.php and you see something like this, access denied, it means that you're not logged in as user 1. If you can't get logged in as user 1, you can change a line in settings.php file, just as outlined here, in order to give yourself access. And we'll show you how to do that in just a second. I'm going to go into my website files. And in that sites folder we keep talking about, default and settings.php, if you don't have access to log in as user 1, there's a variable in here, way down here, called access control for update.php script. You can change this update free access equals false to true, save it, and then update it up to your server. What this will do is give you access to the update.php file, whoever you are. The problem is that will also give people who aren't you access to update.php, so as soon as you're done running it, you really need to switch this back to false again. Everything looks good. So let's try something a little bit fancier, which is updating our version of Drupal core. So we'll go back to Administer Reports Available Updates. And let's deal with this security update that keeps hounding us wherever we go. Again, I'll click on Release Notes. And I see that this release is fixing security vulnerabilities. I can click this to read more information about it. Generally speaking, Drupal is a really solid piece of software, but every once in a while, you do encounter security problems. The Drupal security team will report them, and you can see here they've itemized cross-site scripting, input format access bypass, password leaked in URL, and some other types of security-related issues. It's really important when you encounter a security release announcement like this that you act on it promptly, because if you don't, you're basically leaving your site vulnerable to anybody who has malicious intent and manages to find your site unpatched. It pays to peruse this carefully though, because sometimes some of these don't strictly apply to you. For example, the input format access bypass is only for using the user's signatures feature. And we are not using that on our site, so we are not vulnerable to this particular attack. But let's quit talking about upgrading and go ahead and do it. I'll navigate back to Drupal here. Click the download link just as I did with CCK. Download that to my desktop. Open my FTP client. And remember, I'm still logged in as user 1, still have my site in offline mode. So unlike CCK, where we just sort of brought that up to the server, we want to be a little bit careful with a new version of Drupal. I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to actually remove the sites folder. The sites folder, again, is the one that contains all of your site's information, all your modules you've downloaded, all your settings files. We don't want to override that with what core comes with, because core basically comes with nothing. Just again to re-emphasize the point, anything custom you do to your site should be in that sites folder, so that when we remove it from the version of Drupal that we're upgrading, we don't overwrite any customizations that we've made to our site. So I'll select all these files, again making sure that htaccess is one of them, and upload them into public HTML. Another way to do this, if you don't want to deal with FTP, and I wouldn't blame you, is to do this through the shell. So here I've downloaded a copy of Drupal 6.13 to the directory above my web directory. I'm going to go ahead and extract it with tar zx vf, x instead of c, because we're extracting instead of creating, Drupal 6.13, and then I'll go ahead and click enter, and that will extract everything out. Just as before, I want to delete the sites directory from here, so I'll change directory into Drupal 6.13. Again, make really sure that you're in the right place before you do this. I'm going to rf, meaning remove it and don't bug me about it, the sites directory, so it's not there anymore. And then finally, I'm going to copy everything underneath Drupal 6.13 to my public HTML directory. Drupal 6.13. All right, so let's head back into Drupal and see what update status thinks about us now. Just refresh the available updates page. That looks much better. So now our Drupal version is up to date, as well as our Content Construction Kit version. And if we navigate to the status report, which is under Administer Reports, Status Report, and look, it's informing us that our database updates are not quite up to date. So we'll go ahead and run the update.php script as it recommends. The database update script is a function of Drupal that will go ahead and perform any data updates that need to happen as a result of a module upgrade. For example, if a table gets renamed, or if a column in the table gets renamed, or the module decides to change the way that it stores anything, a database update will go ahead and take care of that for you. Under Select Versions, you'll get more details about what exactly is going to happen. every module that you have installed that has updates available will have one of these select boxes here. And in the case of system module, which is part of Drupal core, it's telling me that it actually has an update to run, update number 6051. If you click on one of these, you can see that there's a whole bunch of numbers here going back to pretty much the first release of Drupal 5, I think. In general, you never want to actually mess with this. You just want to let Drupal select whatever it's going to select rather than force it to run a table upgrade again, because that can actually cause breakage of data. So in the general rule, just go ahead and leave that collapsed and click the update button. So here you can see a summary of all the queries that were executed, if any. In this case, it didn't execute any queries. It just did some kind of an operation. You want to watch here for any errors that might occur. The errors will also be logged. If you click here, you'll be taken to the database log, which will show you everything that's sort of happened on your site. And no red errors here. That's always a good sign. So now the update is complete, and we're ready to check everything out and make sure that it looks okay. So because we touched Drupal core and CCK, you might want to click around to things such as press releases and make sure that, you know, the fields that we've added are still there. Maybe I might want to create a sample piece of content and ensure that all of that stuff is working okay. Just in general, click around the site before you take it out of offline mode and ensure it's working well in terms of what the users are going to expect. Look for any funny business like broken links or anything else that might be out of the ordinary. Once you're sure that everything's looking good, you go to Administer, Site Configuration, and Site Maintenance, and put the site back into online mode. Now if you go back to the home page and you log out, you'll see that your users can see your website back again, and Drupal is all up to date on security patches. So far we've been talking about how to update, you know, minor versions of Drupal, say Drupal 6.12 to 6.13, as well as contributed modules, and most of the time this is what you'll be doing with your Drupal site. Another thing that's worth pointing out, though, is if you're upgrading a major version of Drupal, say from version 6 to version 7, things can get kind of hairy. Modules and themes can break in between versions of Drupal 6, so you'll need to make sure that new versions are available for what you need to do. And you'll want to make sure you review the detailed upgrade steps in upgrade.txt, which is located in your Drupal root directory, which explain the entire process of updating a major core version.
In this video, we've gone soup to nuts on building and launching a Drupal site. In the introduction, we covered the basics of setting up our database, how to get our files and where they needed to go, and then we actually did the installation on our live server. Then we walked through an orientation to give a general feel for what was in the core Drupal installation. We walked through installing one module and then reviewed the suite of modules we'll be using in the video. And then we looked at the important concept of content types in Drupal, and we played around with some of the settings and workflow so that we could distinguish between them and set them up the way that our users are going to need to use them. Then we bulk generated a bunch of content so we could see how it was working and create listings for them so that people could find the content on the site. In terms of users, we set up several different roles so that we could give our users different levels of responsibility. And then we used the comment module as a specific example of how we could set those permissions and use those roles effectively. We finished up by going over a general strategy for how to fill out the rest of the permissions based on the needs for our site. We also looked at Drupal's flexible taxonomy system. We set up a few new vocabularies. One of them was a very organic free tagging system, and the other was a very structured select list vocabulary, and this allowed us to group our content together and create listings and organize them according to the needs of the site. The next thing we looked at was Drupal's theme system, and we looked at some contributed themes and how you can find them and download them and add them to your site to change the look completely. We also looked at how themes have different regions and the entire block system for Drupal that lets you put little pieces of extra content around your site. We also looked at the very important job of a site builder, which is to actually find the modules that fit the needs of the site. We covered a variety of strategies for not only locating the modules, but then being able to assess them and making sure we're getting the best module for our needs. We used the specific example of finding a module to cover our WYSIWYG needs on this site. Once we determined the module that we were going to use for WYSIWYG, then we walked through the steps of configuring that, particularly in relation to input formats and the filters that are within those formats, to make sure that everything was working properly and the users were getting the experience that they would expect. The input formats allowed us to control how much our users could do by stripping out and restricting certain things, but it also gave them extra features and made things easier for them when it came to creating content. We also added on a suite of modules that could handle image handling so that our users could simply add an image right in the WYSIWYG. Another important topic that we covered was access control. We looked at the private module for node access, and that allowed us to control access to each individual piece of content. Then we looked at the views module's access settings, and that let us control access to listings of content. Then we had a discussion about Drupal's file system, which allows you to choose between either having a private file system or public. The next thing that we looked at was how to set up our site so that we could do resource-intensive tasks on a periodic basis. We did this using cron. Once we set cron up, that created our search index so that we could then begin to search the site. From there, we moved on to looking at search configuration so that we could get it set up exactly the way we needed it. Finally, we went through a checklist as we prepared our site for launch. We covered a number of things that would help us with performance and security that we might not have paid so much attention to while we were building the site and doing development on it, but are really important for when we go live. From there, we moved to looking into the future to make sure that you knew the upgrade steps that were required to keep your site secure for the entire life of your website. So we hope you enjoyed Site Building with Drupal. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.